The day was June 19, 1944. A darkened room aboard the USS Lexington held the secret to a victory that would redefine naval warfare. A fighter direction officer watched green blips, 69 Japanese aircraft, crawling across his radar screen 130 miles to the west. This incoming wave, the first of 4 massive strikes launched by Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's mobile fleet, believed they were flying a conventional attack. Their goal was simple: sink at least 5 of the 15 American carriers to shift the balance of power. What the Japanese pilots didn't know was that they were flying straight into a technological trap. Every move of the Japanese formation was being tracked by an SK-2 air search radar aboard the USS Alabama at a range of 150 miles. This information was relayed, plotted on transparent vertical boards in Combat Information Centers, or CICs, across the task force, and analyzed by teams of operators and fighter directors. In the next 12 minutes, American fighter directors had to coordinate dozens of Grumman F6F Hellcat fighters scattered across different altitudes and miles of the Philippine Sea to intercept the enemy. The Americans weren't relying on luck or visual sighting, they were fighting a system. The development of the CIC was a direct result of hard lessons learned earlier in the war. At the Battle of Midway, American carrier defenses were chaotic, relying on primitive radar and guesswork for fighter direction. Carriers burned because their defenses couldn't position fighters effectively. After Midway, Admiral Chester Nimitz's staff studied British radar-directed fighter control and communication failures to create new procedures. By November 1942, standardized fighter direction procedures were established, and by January 1943, the Coordination Center was formally renamed the Combat Information Center. By early 1944, every new American carrier had a dedicated CIC space with trained operators. The CIC system was a model of integration. Radar operators on multiple ships detected raids up to 150 miles away and called out range and bearing from their circular scopes. Enlisted plotters marked these contacts using grease pencils and different colors for enemy and friendly aircraft on large transparent vertical boards. Standing behind the plotters, the Fighter Direction Officer, or FDO, watched the entire tactical picture develop in real time. Using clear, reliable VHF radio, the FDO could calculate intercept courses, altitudes, and timing, then vector the Hellcats into position. This systematic approach had already proven effective. On June 11, 1944, during a massive strike against Saipan, Japanese pilots reported that American Hellcats appeared from nowhere, perfectly positioned. The Americans were tracking every Japanese aircraft from takeoff. 4 days later, a Japanese probe of 7 torpedo aircraft was detected at 80 miles, and 6 were shot down before reaching the carriers. Japanese commanders dismissed this as coincidence. They were wrong. Japanese naval aviation doctrine, emphasizing speed and coordinated strikes from altitude, was sound, but it assumed the enemy was fighting blind. It assumed approach would be undetected until visual range, and that enemy combat air patrol would be randomly positioned. These assumptions, true in 1942, were now obsolete. By June 1944, the Americans were tracking, calculating, and vectoring, ensuring Japanese pilots flew into precisely coordinated traps. Vice Admiral Ozawa, commanding 430 carrier aircraft from 9 carriers, believed he had a numerical advantage. He planned to strike the American fleet from 200 miles out, land on Guam to refuel, and shuttle back to his carriers, overwhelming the American defenses. But American submarines had already spotted his fleet, and American intelligence had broken Japanese operational codes. Admiral Mark Mitzer, commanding Task Force 58, was prepared for a coordinated defense. At 10 o'clock hours on June 19th, Raid 1, 69 aircraft appeared on radar 150 miles out. The FDO and the Lexington CIC, coordinating with the fleet, watched the plot. Hellcats, already airborne on combat air patrol, were vectored along with newly launched fighters to converge at 70 miles range and 18,000 feet. At 10:23, Admiral Mitzer ordered a maximum fighter launch, filling the sky with over 200 coordinated fighters. As the Japanese formation reached 70 miles, the lead Hellcat division reported visual contact. The Hellcats dove in, perfectly positioned to strike from above and ahead. The Japanese never saw them coming. More Hellcats arrived from other vectors exactly where fighter directors had placed them. The formation disintegrated. Those who pressed the attack flew into a wall of anti-aircraft fire, augmented by the new, top-secret proximity-fused shells. By 10:40, the engagement was over. 42 of 69 Japanese aircraft destroyed, 0 hits on American carriers, and only 1 Hellcat shot down. At 11:07, Raid 2, 109 aircraft, was detected 120 miles away. The system repeated: detection, plotting, vectors, intercept. The Japanese formation flew straight, maintaining formation discipline as doctrine prescribed, still believing the enemy was blind. The Hellcats hit them at 60 miles, destroying 70 aircraft before the raid reached the task force. 4 aircraft managed to attack, but all were shot down with no hits. Raid 3, 47 aircraft, followed at 1300 hours, meeting the same pattern. 7 were shot down in the initial contact, the rest turned back. The Japanese pilots were beginning to realize they were flying into an invisible trap. Raid 4, 82 aircraft, couldn't even locate the American fleet, and eventually headed for Guam to land and refuel. Fighter directors detected them and vectored Hellcats from the light carrier Cowpens and others to intercept over a roady field. The 27 American fighters arrived as the Japanese, low on fuel and vulnerable, were circling to land. 30 Japanese aircraft were shot down over the field, 19 were damaged by strafing runs. By 1600 hours, the battle was over. Japanese losses for June 19th exceeded 346 carrier aircraft destroyed. American losses were 30 aircraft. This unprecedented statistical disparity was not primarily because American pilots were better or their aircraft superior, but because the Americans had built a defensive network that integrated radar detection, communication, and precise fighter direction. The Japanese, while possessing components like radar and radio, lacked integration. Their carriers operated independently, tracking their own contacts and directing their own fighters. There was no unified picture, no coordinated vectors, and their fighter direction remained intuitive, not systematic. The CIC was the nerve center that allowed American individual skill to be made effective. The disaster was compounded by the loss of 2 fleet carriers to American submarines. USS Taiho sank after a single torpedo strike led to the fatal decision to spread aviation fuel vapor throughout the ship via the ventilation system, causing a massive internal explosion. Later, the veteran carrier Shokaku, a Pearl Harbor participant, was struck by 3 torpedoes from USS Kavala and sank after uncontrollable aviation fuel fires. The loss of these carriers, coupled with the loss of over 346 aircraft and what remained of Japan's experienced pilot corps, meant Japanese naval aviation would never recover. The Battle of the Philippine Sea confirmed that modern warfare had entered a new era. Integration was the key factor, the ability to combine multiple technologies and procedures into a coordinated system, and the willingness to train personnel systematically. The concept of centralized information, distributed execution, and coordinated action became the standard for American naval air defense and influenced military organization across all services. When American interrogators asked Vice Admiral Ozawa after the war what went wrong, he cited better American aircraft and better trained pilots. He was correct, but incomplete. The Americans had a system that ensured superior information and coordination would always defeat superior individual warriors fighting independently. The gap between 1941 doctrine and 1944 integrated system warfare was unbridgeable. Warrant Officer Sakio Katsumoto, who died instantly after intentionally crashing his aircraft into a torpedo to save his carrier, embodied the best of Japanese warrior spirit, but individual heroism, no matter how extraordinary, could not overcome systematic technological superiority. The performance advantage of the CIC is clear in the numbers. At Midway in 1942, without effective CIC, American defenses were poor. At the Philippine Sea in 1944, with fully developed CIC procedures, 0 Japanese bombs hit American carriers. The CIC converted rough parity into crushing superiority with an 11-to-1 kill ratio. This systematic execution had a devastating psychological impact on the Japanese pilots, leading to fatalism and contributing to the later embrace of kamikaze tactics. The anonymous officers and sailors in the darkened combat information centers proved that modern warfare required technically trained personnel who could operate complex systems under stress. They did not receive public recognition because the Navy wanted to keep the system secret, but their systematic coordination, their practiced procedures, and their integration of technology and doctrine created a weapon the enemy couldn't match. The battle that made the ground victory at Saipan possible taught a fundamental lesson that remains true for modern military operations today. Courage and skill don't matter if your enemy can see you coming and position forces to counter your every move.